The nine-colored fox had been attacking for 2 straight hours and had nothing to show for it. That was the detail that didn't add up. Anyone who followed beast taming, and in Zhongchang, most people knew the basics, understood what Su Qing's beast represented. Heaven ranked 33rd among all catalog species, one of the most gifted natural combat animals alive. It had 9 tails for a reason. Each carried distinct spiritual charge, each struck independently from a separate angle, and together they gave the fox attack vectors that most beasts had no answer for. It had been using all 9. Flame slash, frost claw, lightning burst, cycling through its full ability set and never slowing. The turtle in the center of the training ground had absorbed every last blow, one white scratch. After 140 minutes of unrelenting effort against a heaven-ranked beast, that was the complete extent of the damage on its shell. The 9-colored fox pulled back at the 2-hour mark. Its tails no longer floated, they dragged. Its breath came in visible waves. The turtle watched it with the blank patience of something that had no particular reason to hurry. Something here did not add up. The explanation sat 3 months back, in a beast market at the edge of Jiangchang, on an afternoon when Long Tian had walked in with 5,000 yuan and bought the one thing nobody else would have touched. He had been there because of Lin Chongfang. Lin Chongfang was Long Tian's adoptive father, a lean, quiet man who had owned the same reading glasses for 20 years and had the habit of tearing bread in half before eating, even when he ate alone, even when there was no reason for it. He had been coughing blood into folded white cloth for the better part of a year. The blood poison had started from something he'd done years ago to protect Long Tian. An injury absorbed quietly, managed quietly, until it refused to be managed. 3 months before the market visit, the doctor had confirmed the stage 3 diagnosis. Practically untreatable at that stage. The only thing in the medical literature with genuine reversal potential was a celestial restoration beast, a healing type unavailable anywhere in Jiangchang's commercial market, currently accessible only through the medical research wing at Long Yuan Advanced Beast Taming Academy. Long Tian needed enrollment at that academy. He needed beasts capable of surviving a brutal entrance examination to earn it. Competitive beasts required money he didn't have. He had 5,000 yuan, and he went to the market. The display aisles were warm and busy that afternoon. Students from his school moving through with their parents, discussing bloodline grades in the practiced tones of people raised to this. Long Tian moved past the prime enclosures without slowing. He stopped at a row of pens near the back wall, in a section with a slight drainage problem and no foot traffic. Jade Pattern Spirit Turtle, 5,000 yuan, loyalty 1%. A red sticker below, discarded, dangerous to tame. The turtle behind the mesh had a shell with faint green patterning spiraling toward the center. It looked at Long Tian with the unfazed patience of something that had stopped expecting much from people. A discarded beast. Any beast with loyalty below 72% was a legal tameable at risk. Contract it and it might turn within days. Nobody bought discarded beasts except people who had run out of better options. Long Tian paid 5,000 yuan and took it to the alley behind the market. The ancestral calamity beast system had arrived in his awareness 3 days earlier. He didn't fully understand its origin. It sat in the corner of his vision the way a floater sits at the edge of a lens, patient and present, not asking for explanation. What it required was a contracted beast with at least 1% bloodline purity. The turtle's 1% cleared the threshold. He applied the first bottle of ancestral reversion serum. The transformation ran 4 minutes. The turtle didn't thrash or call out, it simply changed. The shell thickened and went from pale green to deep red-black, plated with ridged bone armor that hadn't existed in its modern form. Its neck lengthened. Its pale jade eyes went the color of dried blood. The blood-patterned savage turtle stood in the alley light and fixed its attention on Long Tian with absolute, unconditional focus. The system updated its statistics. Strength, 180. Defense, 220. Speed, 45. Spirit resistance, 190. Long Tian thought of Wang Hao, the school director's son, the loudest voice in every group chat, who had spent 2 months informing anyone who'd listen about the jade spirit snake his family had sourced. Elite tier, 2-star transcendent, over 1 million yuan in acquisition cost. The school's formal assessment had placed the snake's strength at 95. The discarded turtle from the drainage problem aisle had nearly double that figure and had cost less than a decent jacket. Nobody in the world knew this except Long Tien. He intended to maintain that gap for as long as possible. The class group chat discovered the discarded beast purchased the following morning. Someone at the market had recognized him. A photograph circulated. By the time Long Tien checked his phone, 47 messages had accumulated and more were arriving. Wang Hao opened the discussion. 3 detailed paragraphs on the hazards of sub-percent loyalty beasts, written with the authority of someone who had studied safety protocols in a classroom, and the confidence of someone whose family connections had always handled the actual contracting. The pile-on organized quickly. Then Liu Ruyan wrote. Long Tien had spent 7 months tutoring her. Every evening, working through beast attribute theory, exam formats, written evaluations, keeping her grades above the expulsion threshold, explaining things a second and third time when she needed it, declining the advances she offered during those sessions because accepting would have been wrong. 2 weeks ago, a student named Lu Yan Roe had transferred in, wealthy in the way that filled a room without effort, carrying a high-tier beast carrier and the social ease of someone accustomed to spaces reshaping around him. Lu Ruyan had made her decision within 48 hours. Long Tien hadn't said anything about it. What she wrote in the chat was a different matter entirely. She told the class that Long Tien had made her feel unsafe during their sessions, that she had been afraid to speak until now. The timing was exact, dropped into an active pile-on, with Lu Yan Rue presumably reading along. She had 7 months of academic survival built on Long Tien's work, and she had chosen to use the weight of that relationship to frame him in front of everyone who knew them both. The chat erupted into noise. Long Tien set his phone down and finished his breakfast. Then he picked it up and wrote one reply. She should file those concerns formally with the exam board, since he had kept complete records of every session and was prepared to share them with anyone who asked. He suggested she think carefully before pressing it. He added that he hoped the notes he had written for her continued to be useful, since no more would be coming. Lu Ruyan did not respond. Neither did Wang Hao after a short silence. Long Tien closed the app and went to find work. The job posting didn't include a client name, standard for someone with money who preferred not to attract general approaches. He messaged the contact number and received a Northern District address, in the part of the city where wall height was a statement about position rather than security. A courtyard with expensive pale stone, everything arranged just a degree too precisely, the impression of calm rather than the feeling of it. The client was Su Qing. He recognized her from school, governor's daughter, top-ranked all-attribute talent in their year. Her attention had never previously fallen on him. She evaluated him now with the flat assessment of someone determining whether a service would actually deliver. Her regular trainer had quit the previous week. The exam was 4 months out. She needed daily combat sessions for her 9-colored fox and was paying 130,000 yuan per session. He agreed and asked when she wanted to start. She said immediately. Wang Hao was already in the training ground. He had received a similar invitation, brought his jade spirit snake, and introduced it with the ease of someone whose track record had never required genuine revision. The 9-colored fox removed that confidence in just over 3 minutes. It identified the snake's attack angle on the first pass, sidestepped it twice, then sealed both lateral exits with a spiritual barrier before the snake could build any momentum. Wang Hao recalled his beast with composure that cost him more than he showed. Long Tien produced the savage turtle. Su Qing's expression when she saw it was the expression of someone deciding whether to be polite about a mistake. She said, clearly, that this was a serious preparation session. He said he understood. The fox moved. Its first slash hit the turtle's left shell plate and left nothing. Flame impact. Nothing. Lightning step. 2 strikes in under a second from different angles. A faint mark appeared and disappeared within seconds. The fox escalated, abandoning energy conservation, running its entire repertoire, and the turtle absorbed each exchange with the patient certainty of something built from a design 800 years older than anything else in this training ground. An hour passed. Su Qing stood very still across the space. Wang Hao had gone quiet in a way different from his usual quiet. Not self-management, but the quiet of someone whose working framework had just encountered something that didn't fit. At 2 hours, the fox withdrew. Its tails dragged rather than floated. 1 white scratch after everything it could deliver. Su Qing approved the session fee and asked him back tomorrow. He arrived the next morning to a different fox. She had spent the night developing a new technique, Flame Slash, a compressed edge release that concentrated penetration on a narrow line rather than spreading force across a broad impact. It was built specifically to address what she'd seen the day before. The turtle's flat plate defense was extreme, but the plate seams had marginally less overlap. The fox opened with it. The first slash cut a real line. Shallow, but visible. Su Qing's posture changed. The fox pressed, a second slash at the same seam, a third from a slightly adjusted angle, probing the vulnerability's depth. Long Tian tracked the defense readings in his system overlay. Blood Ignition sat on its 12-hour cooldown from last night's Ancient Realm session. 2 or 3 more slashes at those angles and the damage would become real. He let 2 more land. Then he activated Blood Ignition. The blood pattern on the turtle's shell flooded red in under a second. Its body temperature spiked. Strength tripled. Defense climbed past numbers the overlay rendered cleanly. The fox's next flame slash hit the activated shell, and the spiritual energy scattered sideways, dispersed on impact. The turtle moved. Not fast. It would never be fast. But it crossed the training ground with a weight that altered the quality of the space around it. 6 deliberate steps, cutting off the fox's lateral break not through speed, but by narrowing the available angles through positioning, the hunting geometry of something that had once tracked faster prey across open ground and learned to use terrain rather than pace. The fox had nowhere left to move. One strike, targeted at the leg joints. The 9-colored fox went down. Not injured, contained, its mobility locked, tails flat against the ground. Su Qing called the session. She stood across the training ground for a moment. Then she calculated the fee herself and named 400,000 yuan. He hadn't asked for a revision. She had done the math on the value of what she'd received. He stopped at the pharmacy on the way home, bought the expensive version of Lin Chongfang's blood cleansing supplement, and left it on the kitchen table without making it a conversation. His father was reading, glasses on, book open, a cup of tea cooling beside it, the habit of tearing bread in half still present even at a table set for one. He looked up when Long Tian came in. Long Tian said the training was going well. Lin Chongfang said he'd expected it would, and went back to his page. The Ancient Realm training ground revealed itself on the 3rd day of work. A section of the system interface that had looked like visual scaffolding, a simple framed door in the lower left corner, opened into a space that was not a simulation. Forest. Real bark with real grain. Soil that smelled of actual earth and something animal underneath. Shadow wolves appeared 40 meters out and covered the distance fast. He had no weapon. His turtle wasn't present in this space. He lasted 4 minutes. He woke on his bedroom floor with no physical marks and his heart doing something uncomfortable in his chest. Every second of those 4 minutes had registered as entirely real. The loophole emerged on his second entry. The system expelled users who completed the assigned mission objective. It had no mechanism for removing users still engaged with an incomplete one. If he kept moving, engaging, retreating, circling, targeting wolves without finishing the pack, the timer stayed open. 5 hours inside translated to approximately 5 minutes of real time outside. 3 entries per day, each one potentially running for hours. He adjusted his sleeping schedule. He barely needed sleep anymore. The months moved in the compressed rhythm of sustained work. Morning sessions at Su Qing's estate. The fox developed new techniques. The turtle adapted. The fox adapted to the turtle's adaptations. A cycle quietly building something neither of them named. Ancient Realm nights with the Shadow Wolf pack. Repeated until boredom displaced difficulty. Then advancement to harder tiers. Faster deaths. Faster learning. Income accumulating in steady increments. Crossing 1 million yuan. Then 2. Then the exam announcement landed and changed the landscape entirely. New format. Restricted zone survival. 5 days in a sealed wilderness area. 5 flags per team. No monitoring. No intervention. No rescue unless a team lit a distress flare. And a flare ended the candidacy. The new academy president had signed off on it without advance notice to any of the schools. Long Tian read the announcement once and added 2 sessions per day to his existing schedule. The doctor's visit came 2 weeks later. Lin Chongfang's blood poison had advanced to confirmed stage 3. The window of significant function was 18 months to 2 years at the current rate. Suppression treatments existed. expensive enough to be beyond any realistic plan based on current funds, and they were suppression, not treatment. The only curative option in the literature was the Celestial Restoration Beast, available only through Long Yuan Academy's medical research program. Nothing Long Tian hadn't known. But hearing a specific number attached to a specific person was different from carrying the knowledge abstractly. He walked home from that appointment and sat on the front steps for a while. The afternoon ran its ordinary course. A vendor's cart down the block, distant traffic, a dog barking at something it would never catch. He went inside. Lin Chongfang sat at the kitchen table with his glasses on, and his book open, and his habit of tearing the bread in half still intact, the way it had been for as long as Long Tian could remember. He looked up. Long Tian said the training was going well. Lin Chongfang said he'd known it would be. Neither of them said anything else about it. Long Tian's spirit attribute crossed 50 points 6 weeks later. The system flagged it before the physical sensation registered. Second contract slot unlocked. For most students, this threshold required years of expensive cultivation supplements and private academy spirit enhancement arrays. Long Tian had arrived here through Ancient Realm combat and nothing else. He returned to the market. The giant spirit panda occupied the last enclosure on the left, round, unhurried, working through a bamboo stalk with the focused patience of something that had nowhere to be and no opinion about it. 3,200 yuan. Discarded status. The market staff had positioned it near the exit with the placement of people hoping a problem would quietly resolve itself. Long Tian paid and took it to the alley. The berserk iron-eating beast that emerged from the transformation was not a panda in any sense that mattered. It stood differently, weight forward, jaw set, eyes carrying the flat readiness of something calibrated for a world more serious than the one a panda inhabits. Its ancestors had worked through the armor of siege animals during an era when siege animals were a genuine military problem. They had solved the issue by eating the relevant materials. Long Tian checked the strength rating and read it a second time to be certain. He brought the iron-eating beast home. The savage turtle examined its new companion with the measured patience of something that had stopped forming strong opinions about life. The iron-eating beast sat, looked at Long Tian, and waited. He scratched it behind the ear. It permitted this without enthusiasm or objection. Exam day arrived on a Tuesday. Wang Kaiwan appeared beside Long Tian at the staging area before the bus lines organized. A well-dressed student with the comfortable posture of someone who had already done his research and was confirming what he'd found. He said he needed a team. Long Tian asked why specifically him. Wang Kaiwan said he had learned of the Su Qing training arrangement, not the details, just the fact, and had noted that her 9-colored fox's technique development had sharply accelerated over the previous 4 months. He worked from available information rather than guesswork, and the information pointed at Long Tian. Long Tian said he was open to the conversation. Su Qing arrived before loading began, carrier case in hand, and walked past Lu Yanrui's assembled group without pausing at the invitation implicit in his positioning. He was there with his transcendent 3-star swallowtail demon fox case on open display, carried forward, visible, a credential offered in advance. Su Qing set her case down beside Long Tian. The bus filled. She sat next to him, not for the window, not for the quieter aisle, specifically next to him, without comment or explanation. Lu Yanrui watched from across the aisle. Long Tian watched the city give way to highway. The restricted zone opened 6 hours east, in sealed hills that smelled of pine resin and cold soil and something wilder underneath both. The exam head ran the rules at the trailhead. 5 flags, 5 days, distress flare ends your candidacy. And then everyone went in. The first 2 hours moved quietly. Wang Kaiwan read the terrain as they walked, noting elevation changes and natural sight corridors in a low voice. Long Tian positioned the carrier cases at the group's edges, which kept the formation naturally compact without anyone making it a directive. 2 of their 5 team members, Fang Anhe with her astral butterfly and Xiao Jiong with his ape guardian, walked in the center and discussed the zone's pace. Fang Anhe had stated at the bus, with real conviction, that a crystal tiger was entirely manageable in a solo engagement given a sufficiently mobile beast. The tigers came from the left flank, 3 of them, coordinated, targeting the edges first, as every large predator targets edges first. Xiao Jiong's ape guardian moved on the lead tiger and caught a swipe across its armored shoulder. The force was above what the armor was rated to absorb. It staggered, couldn't recover its footing, went down. The second tiger hit Fang Anhe's butterfly before the beast had fully cleared its carrier. The butterfly did not get back up. Fang Anhe made a sound and stepped backward. Wang Kaiwan caught her and said, evenly, that the third tiger was already moving, and she needed to commit to a direction. She froze. Long Tian did not move to intervene. The savage turtle stepped forward on its own instinct, not under direct command, responding to proximity threat through the hunting knowledge built into its ancient bloodline, and placed itself between the third tiger and the group. The tiger assessed the turtle for 2 seconds. The math was wrong. It withdrew into the tree line. 2 beasts gone. 2 team members at significantly reduced combat capacity. 4 functional fighters remained. They adjusted formation and moved deeper into the zone. Somewhere ahead, Lu Ruyan was operating with Lu Yan Rui's resources behind her. Long Tian had no read on their position or their flag count, but the zone wasn't large enough that 5 days passed inside it without crossing paths with the people who had reason to find you. He adjusted the carrier straps across his shoulders and kept walking. They found the first flag on the second afternoon. A signal ribbon tied high in a branch, its blue threading catching the light through a gap in the canopy. Wang Kaiwan spotted it first and pointed without raising his voice. They moved in from the eastern edge, using the tree coverage, reading the ground before each step. Long Tian stopped 6 meters from the base of the tree. The grass here was wrong, not flattened by wind or foot traffic, pressed flat in a circle, the specific pattern that appears when something heavy sits directly on grass from above, and the blades slowly push back toward vertical over hours. He crouched and worked a knife blade flat beneath the surface layer. 3 centimeters down, he found the first stake, a covered pit, woven grass mat over the top, stakes at the base and all 4 walls, and a flag placed above the only approach line that didn't route a person around obstacles. Someone had spent serious time building this. Wang Kaiwan crouched beside him and looked at what he was looking at. He kept his expression neutral. Su Qing's voice came from behind them. Low, steady, movement in the brush, northeast, 40 meters out. The movement didn't wait. A team of 6 came out of the tree line at a pace that said they had been watching from the moment Long Tian's group entered the clearing. Lu Ruyan was at the center. Lu Yan Rui's resources had given her a team organized for real field work. 4 members with beasts already released, positioned to funnel anyone approaching the flag directly onto the covered ground. Long Tian's team had entered 2 meters east of the expected approach line. Those 2 meters were everything. Liu Ruyan's face moved through several expressions when she registered who it was, settling finally on the one she had prepared. Unhurried disdain, performed for her team's benefit. She said some things about how difficult the exam appeared to be for certain people. She said more things after that. The members of her team laughed at the appropriate moments in the way of people following a cue they'd been given. Long Tian looked at her lineup. 4 opponents, 4 beasts. The heaviest of them a high-tier transcendent 2-star held at half-release on the far left. Liu Ruyan's own beast, a light feather bird, circled above her shoulder with the casual ease of something accustomed to being the most impressive animal in any given space. Fast, aerial, capable of light/techniques that disorient through contact rather than impact. Lu Ruyan told him to drop his flags and walk away. She said it would go better for him that way. Long Tian opened the second carrier. The iron-eating beast stepped out and sat in the clearing grass. Round through the body, black and white patterning, a face that belonged on a wildlife conservation sign. One of Liu Ruyan's team members laughed out loud before checking to see if the others were laughing too. Liu Ruyan just stared. She sent her light feather bird with a sharp hand signal. The bird was genuinely fast, built for aerial speed and diving precision, its light/technique hitting like a focused beam rather than a physical strike. It came down from altitude at the iron-eating beast, with the certainty of a predator that had never found anything in its weight class it couldn't handle. The iron-eating beast raised one paw and caught it mid-dive. Not a swipe, a catch. Paw closing around the bird's body with the matter-of-fact competence of something that had once caught much faster animals in flight. The bird's wings hammered against the grip. The iron-eating beast looked at it for a moment with flat, bright eyes. Then it ate it. The clearing went silent. Lu Ruyan made a sound that didn't reach the level of words. Zhang Mong, the team's heaviest combat member, military-grade reinforcement gear strapped over his exam vest, sent his primal demon forward with a barked command. The primal demon was built for sustained exchange. Dense body, combat armor plating bonded into its hide, bred specifically to function in reinforced gear and exhaust opponents who broke their beasts against its defense before landing anything significant. Lu Ruyan's team had sourced it exactly for this type of situation. The iron-eating beast ate the armor, not broke through, consumed it. Its teeth found the edge of the top plating and stripped it backward in a single motion, with the practiced rhythm of something for which armor had historically been the first course rather than the main obstacle. The primal demon's exposure was immediate. The follow-up strikes landed on the underlying body with a speed no one on Lu Ruyan's team had been prepared to process. Jiang Mong shouted a recall command. His beast was already down. 4 team members remained on Lu Ruyan's side, 2 beasts, and a flag trap that applied to no one present. Wang Kaiwan walked to the tree, unhooked the flag, and folded it into his pack without comment. That was one. They didn't see the second ambush approach, not through carelessness, because the people behind it had positioned themselves during the night before the exam started, which no legitimate candidate could have arranged. 6 students, none of them from Zhongcheng School, registered under the relocation candidate provision at the last moment. Wang Kaiwan had noted the loophole before the exam. Neither of them had expected it to be used this precisely. They emerged from a gully crossing on the 3rd morning, already spread across 3 positions, beasts pre-released and staged with military coordination. Their lead beast was a warbear, 3-star, combat lineage, battle armor fitted, and locked at every joint. A 3-star beast in a student examination was illegal by 3 separate regulatory clauses. This wasn't a competition move. Long Tian had time to understand the situation clearly, because the 6 candidates opened with 2 supporting beasts meant to fragment his team before the warbear engaged. The plan required isolation. He didn't give them isolation. The iron-eating beast went forward before the supporting beasts established their spread, pushing past on the inside line, rather than stopping to engage, moving directly for the warbear. The opposing tamer activated his beast's full armor sequence. The iron-eating beast bit through the shoulder joint. The sound carried further than it should have in the morning air, a sustained tearing, the specific resonance of bonded plating separating from its anchor points. The warbear's armor was designed to distribute impact force across the entire integrated shell, which required the shell to remain whole. With the shoulder joint open, the distribution system failed inward. The iron-eating beast worked from the breach outward, stripping section by section with a rhythm that appeared almost unhurried, as though the pace was set by the work itself rather than urgency. The warbear fought back. It was powerful, stripped of its armor, trained for exactly this, but it was fighting a beast that had been solving this particular problem since before any living person's grandmother was born. The exchange lasted 90 seconds. The warbear went down. Wang Kaiwan's lazy pig had been active since the engagement opened. Long Tian still didn't fully understand the mechanics of what it did to combat tempo, a suppression effect that made opponents' decisions arrive half a beat late, like the air itself had slightly increased in resistance. By the time 3 of the 6 candidates recognized they'd lost the initiative, regaining it was no longer a realistic option. Long Tian fired a directional signal arrow toward the gully, not a distress flare, the kind that summoned exam patrol to a position, and moved his team east. The exam patrol, operating inside a no-intervention zone with no monitoring protocols, had their own methods for handling illegal 3-star beasts and the people who brought them in. Long Tian had reviewed the patrol roster before the exam. He didn't need to stay and observe what happened next. That was 2 flags. The Shadowflower Demon found them on the 3rd afternoon, a zone resident, not a competitor's beast, large enough to have a defined territorial perimeter, and they had crossed it without reading the ground sign in time. It emerged from the undergrowth to their left with the quiet arrival of something that had no need for speed to establish threat. Its blade-edged petals were already extended and cycling, filling a radius of roughly 8 meters with a slow rotating field of cuts. Moving into that radius meant accepting what the field did to anything inside it. Brother Chi's team came out of the tree line on the right at approximately the same moment. They had been following Long Tian's group for most of the afternoon, waiting for a clean window. The Shadowflower Demon's emergence had closed all the exits simultaneously. Long Tian's team to the west of the petal field, Brother Chi's team to the east, the demon itself blocking the only withdrawal line that didn't require crossing something worse. Brother Chi stood at the far edge of the field and looked across it with the expression of someone whose plan had just become considerably more interesting than expected. He called across the space. He said this was unfortunate timing for both parties. He said he was open to discussing terms, if Long Tian's side had flags available. Long Tian looked at the Shadow Flower Demon. He looked at his turtle. He told Wang Kaiwan to keep Su Qing's beast in its carrier. Then he did something that made no tactical sense from any angle an observer could see. He released the savage turtle directly into the petal radius, walked it 5 steps into the rotating field, and had it lower to the ground and stop moving. The petal blades swept across the turtle's shell on the next rotation. The turtle stayed still. The contact left a visible line across its surface. Real damage, legible from 40 meters away in the tree shadow. From that distance, what Brother Chi's team saw was Long Tian's strongest beast lying motionless inside an active cutting field, taking hits. Brother Chi called across that the situation appeared even worse than it had looked from the beginning. Long Tian asked what Brother Chi's current flag count was. A pause while the math was processed. Brother Chi had 3 flags. He needed 5. Long Tian was standing with a reduced team, a turtle down in an active field, and a panda-shaped animal whose track record in this zone, news traveled between teams faster than people expected in a confined area, suggested something that didn't fully fit the category of panda. Brother Chi said he was prepared to offer terms. He would accept 2 flags and leave Long Tian with 1. Long Tian said he was prepared to offer terms in return. He would accept 2 flags from Brother Chi and leave him with 1. Brother Chi's tone changed. He noted that Long Tian's negotiating position didn't appear to support that direction. Long Tian activated blood ignition. The turtle rose from the petal field with its shell flooded red, body temperature making the air above it shimmer. The rotating blades hit the activated shell and registered approximately the way rainfall registers on stone. The turtle walked through the remaining field and reached the Shadow Flower Demon's root base in 6 steady steps. The demon's entire offensive architecture was built for perimeter defense. It had nothing designed for close quarters. The turtle struck twice. The Shadow Flower Demon's root structure collapsed. The petal field went still. Brother Chi stood on the far side of what was no longer an obstacle, with his 3 flags and a different set of options than he'd had 40 seconds ago. His 2 strongest beasts were already released. His team was looking at a turtle that had walked through an active cutting field, and at a panda-shaped animal whose earlier work against the warbear had apparently circulated in the zone with some descriptive detail. He handed over 2 flags. Long Tian nodded, let his team rest and resupply for 20 minutes, and moved east. 4 flags, 1 more needed. The Yongqing team's position wasn't difficult to locate. They had been eliminating other teams with a thoroughness that left a secondary trail: disturbed exam sites, abandoned supply packs, signal arrows fired from positions that didn't match the exam board's marker placement. Everyone in the zone who was paying attention had their approximate location by the end of day 2. 5 students, 5 beasts, every one of the beasts carrying the specific combination of power output and wrong ranking that came from illegal evolutionary enhancement. A single forced 3-star beast in a student exam was a violation. 5 of them from one team was a statement. Wang Kaiwan ran the calculation quietly during the night rest and said the Yangqing team's sourcing exceeded anything explainable by standard means. He noted the resemblance to the relocation candidate provision exploit. He said the probability of an organizational connection was worth considering. Long Tian said he had considered it the night before. The Yangqing team held the gully approach to the zone's central plateau, the natural collection point for final day flag competition. They knew they were a blocking position and made no attempt to appear otherwise. Yangqing himself stood in the open ground in front of the gully, older than most candidates by enough to register, and told Long Tian plainly that this section of the zone was closed. Long Tian released the savage turtle and the iron-eating beast into the open ground and sent them forward. The fight that followed wasn't clean. The Yangqing beasts were genuinely powerful. Their evolution was illegal, but it was real, and 3-star output meant 3-star damage regardless of how it was acquired. The turtle held the center, absorbing the sustained fire from 2 of the heavier opponents, its blood ignition cycling on its limit window. The 9-colored fox came out at Su Qing's direction, working from range, flame-arcing in at angles she had spent months developing, targeting the Yangqing team's rear coverage while the turtle pinned the front. Long Tian watched her move through positioning patterns he recognized from 600 training sessions. She didn't need direction for any of it. The iron-eating beast handled the Yangqing team's siege type, forced 3-star, double armor plating, built to outlast anything in the student tier. It didn't outlast the iron-eating beast. 11 minutes. At the end, the Yangqing team had no standing beasts, and one flag that wasn't going to get them out of the zone regardless. Yangqing himself stood in the gully approach with the specific stillness of someone who had genuinely believed this outcome wasn't possible. He looked at the turtle, shell-scored in several places, body temperature still elevated from the combat. He looked at the panda-shaped animal methodically consuming the siege type's armor plating with the unhurried focus of something that had decided this was simply where its afternoon had arrived. He looked at Long Tian and said nothing. Long Tian collected the flag, confirmed the count with Wang Kaiwan, and sent the success signal. 5 flags. Day 4, mid-afternoon. They made camp in the gully and let the beasts rest. Long Tian sat with his back against the gully wall as the light dropped, listening to the zone settle into its night sounds, and thought about Lin Chongfang. The supplement left on the kitchen table, the book open at the same page 2 days running, the reading glasses with the left arm held by a replaced screw, 20 years of use in every scratch on the frame, 18 months, maybe 2 years. He had the flags, he had the entrance. What he didn't have yet was the time between walking through the academy gates and finding what he needed inside. And every day of that time was a day Lin Chongfang spent at Stage 3 with nothing better than suppression options. The iron-eating beast finished the last of the armor plating and curled at the camp's edge. The savage turtle had gone still beside it, shell faded back to its normal deep red. Su Qing was asleep 3 meters away, her carrier case beside her hand. Wang Kaiwan sat on the gully rim working through his watch rotation, humming something very quietly to himself. Long Tian closed his eyes and ran tomorrow's math until sleep came. The exit signal arrived at mid-morning on day 5, a low horn carrying across the zone from the perimeter beacons, pulling surviving teams toward the extraction point. They emerged from the tree line into the cleared staging ground and found scattered groups of candidates, most of them showing the particular combination of relief and physical exhaustion that meant the zone had treated them roughly as expected. Long Tian counted as he crossed the staging ground. He kept it low, not making it obvious. 30 candidates. Wang Kaiwan came to stand beside him and arrived at the same number from a different angle. Neither of them said anything. The exam head announced the admission figure. 30 slots, 1 per surviving candidate. Around them, teams embraced. People sat in the grass. Laughter came from a group near the center of the staging area. Genuine laughter, the kind that comes after fear has passed. Most of the 30 were choosing in this moment not to look at the total number of candidates who had entered the zone 5 days ago. Long Tian understood the choice. He had made different ones, and he didn't need to impose his accounting on people who deserved this particular morning. Wang Kaiwan, very quietly, said he had done the count. Long Tian said he had too. They let the others celebrate. Neither of them said it aloud. The distress signal came through on a Flame Dragon Task Force relay during the staging ground dispersal. Not an exam frequency. The civilian emergency band, the kind broadcast citywide when something qualified as large-scale disaster rather than a standard beast incident. The candidates around Long Tian were still exchanging relief on the staging ground when the task force unit posted at the perimeter received the confirmation and began redirecting everyone toward the western evacuation route. Zhangchang, the city was under attack. Long Tian didn't wait for the full briefing. He had the carrier straps across his shoulders before the task force finished the sentence. Wang Kaiwan caught his arm and said the evacuation protocol was west, away from the city. Long Tian said he understood the protocol. He moved east. The task force officer at the perimeter stepped into his path. He went around her and ran. The transit road back had been clear 5 days ago. It wasn't clear now. 2 hours out, evidence of the event reached him. A civilian transport stopped diagonally across the road, passenger door hanging open, no one inside. Personal belongings scattered across the surface further down, dropped during a rapid exit from vehicles. Then the road surface changed. The asphalt cracked and heaved in sections, as though something very heavy had moved across it from below. 3 hours out, he heard the city. Not the ordinary compound noise of people and traffic and commerce, the specific layered sound of beast activity at scale, of human response signals, of structural percussion that large bodies make when they move through built environments with no regard for what the built environments were designed for. A city in the middle of becoming something it had never been. He reached the eastern outskirts at mid-afternoon and released the savage turtle. The residential streets had beasts in them, not concentrated, distributed, individual animals driven into areas they'd never normally occupy, spooked and reactive, some hunting and some simply moving with the disoriented aggression of creatures removed from familiar terrain. The turtle's presence established something around Longtian that most beasts recalculated quickly. The ones that didn't recalculate got a demonstration. He covered 6 blocks without the sustained fights he'd expected, and picked up pace as the route clarified. The hospital district sat further inside the city, where the disruption was heavier and the street damage ran deeper. 11 floors. The ground entrance had a collapsed section of security gate, bent outward from the inside. Something had pushed through from within rather than entered from the street. Longtian moved into the lobby and read the floor. Claw marks on the service desk. Overturned furniture patterned the way furniture goes when people leave fast, rather than when anything systematically destroys a space. Emergency lighting only. Building power gone. He went up. Floor 2. Clear. Floor 3. A territorial beast in the East Wing corridor. Mid-tier. Spooked into aggression. Committing before it had full information. The turtle absorbed the first charge and replied. Clear. Floor 4 had 2 of them working together. Something had been organizing the local wildlife before pushing it into the city. Not random displacement, but coordination. He spent 9 minutes on Floor 4. Floors 5 and 6, clear. Floor 7, 2 larger animals, 12 minutes. Floor 8, clear. By the time he reached the landing, and the hall empty in a way that said it had been cleared earlier rather than simply avoided. His parents were on the 9th floor. Bed number memorized, written on a card in his wallet he'd never once needed to take out. He pushed open the ward door. His mother sat beside Lin Chongfang's bed with her hands folded in her lap. Lin Chongfang sat up against the headboard with his reading glasses resting on the side table, and looked at the ward door with the expression he used when Longtian came home later than expected. Not worried, not scolding, simply present and noting the hour. Longtian stood in the doorway with blood on his sleeve and the savage turtle at his side. The iron-eating beast pushed through the doorway behind him, filling rather more of the ward entrance than the ward entrance was designed to accommodate, and turned its flat, bright predator's eyes on the 2 people in the room. His mother made a sound. Longtian turned around and kicked the iron-eating beast in the side. Not hard. A firm, deliberate kick, the kind that conveys a specific instruction without requiring words. The iron-eating beast looked at him for a moment. Then it sat down in the corridor, turned its face away from the ward entrance, and studied the opposite wall in the manner of something thinking carefully about its recent choices. His mother looked at Longtian, she looked at the corridor, she looked back at him. Lin Chongfang said, from the bed, that he appeared to have had an eventful few days. Longtian said the exam had gone well. He stayed on the ward floor while the city sounds outside shifted and restacked. The building was defensible, cleared below, the surrounding beasts distributed enough that nothing had organized an approach to this structure. He ran assessments on both carrier cases and checked his beast's conditions and waited for the situation outside to give him useful information. What it gave him was the frost cicada. He heard it before he understood it. A high, sustained frequency that shouldn't have reached through concrete walls. But the frost cicada's resonance had a physical component that traveled through structure rather than simply air. Within 30 seconds of the sound, the ward temperature dropped enough to make breath visible. Within a minute, the window glass had a white film climbing from the edges inward. An ancient beast society elite. Not a displaced wild animal. Someone's specific instrument, in this building, doing a specific job. The person who made the next decision was not Longtian. Lin Chongfang got out of bed. He did it with the careful, deliberate movement of someone managing a body that had real limits, reaching for the outer coat folded over the bedside chair, leaving the reading glasses on the table where he'd set them. He moved to the ward door and stopped beside Longtian without looking at him directly. Longtian started to say something. Lin Chongfang put one hand briefly on his shoulder, stepped into the corridor, and went to the stairwell. Long Tian followed him to the landing. The frost cicada was 6 floors down, operating in the building's central atrium. Long Tian could see it from above, body wreathed in ice-blue resonance light, wings sustaining a field that had dropped the building's ambient temperature across all 9 floors. Its combat rating was not something a standard military squad would engage without specific equipment and full team composition. The Flame Dragon Task Force had a response protocol for this class of beast. Lin Chongfeng was a man with stage 3 blood poison in a hospital coat. He walked down the 6 flights at his own pace and entered the atrium. The frost cicada pivoted, registered the new presence, and directed its resonance field's focused apex at him. A sustained frequency output that, at its concentrated peak, made bone vibration a genuine factor in how long any combatant remained functional. The field held. Lin Chongfeng stood in it for 3 seconds. Then he moved his hand. One motion. The kind of motion that doesn't require elaboration because what it produces does all its own explaining. The frost cicada was still in the process of registering what had happened when it wasn't there anymore. A line of displaced air was all that marked where the technique had traveled, and the building's temperature stopped dropping in the same instant. Long Tian stood on the stairwell landing and tried to find a framework for what he'd just seen. The man in the hospital bed. The man at stage 3 blood poison for over a year. The man who tore his bread in half before eating it and had owned the same reading glasses for 20 years and never mentioned having anything to do with combat beyond what was needed to move through the world. He had just walked down 6 flights and ended a beast the Flame Dragon Task Force would not have engaged without preparation, and he had done it with a technique so refined it left nothing but air. The masked man came through the ground floor entrance 3 minutes later. He had been outside coordinating the wildlife disruption, a handler rather than a direct combatant, which was both more dangerous as a role and harder to identify from any position that didn't have complete situational overview. He entered the atrium with 2 beasts already active, a 3-star flame toad, heavy and thermal, built for sustained fire output at range, and a smaller escort type at his side. He saw what remained of the frost cicada. He stopped moving. Then he looked up to the stairwell landing where Long Tian was standing and said, at a volume clearly intended for the landing, that the boy should come down rather than making this complicated. Long Tian came down. He sent the savage turtle first. The flame toad opened with a sustained thermal burst, the kind that controlled a target through heat displacement rather than direct impact, a containment technique rather than a kill. The turtle walked through it. The heat accumulated on the outer shell layer rather than dispersing, working at the surface in the way that sustained thermal did, but the turtle's defense was built for extended exchange rather than flash resistance. Long Tian activated blood ignition. The thermal dynamic inverted. The flame toad's output was now pushing against a surface running its own elevated heat, and the exchange became counterproductive for the toad at the precise moment the blood ignition reached full activation. The turtle moved inside the thermal radius. What followed was brief. The masked man produced a talisman from his inner vest. Flat gray, military tier construction, the kind society operatives carried for extraction rather than combat, used to deny a position rather than win an engagement. Long Tian recognized it a half-second early and pulled the turtle back. The detonation cleared 8 meters of atrium floor. The masked man walked through the smoke toward the building's rear exit with the specific gait of someone who had bought himself time rather than won anything. He didn't reach the exit. The sound from outside stopped him. Long Tian felt the pressure change before he identified it, a shift in the air that had nothing to do with weather, the kind that belongs to something very large moving without care for what it moves through. Through the shattered atrium entrance he could see the street, and above the street's roofline something was rising. A tree, or what the word tree refers to when it's applied to something that doesn't belong to any current taxonomy because the species it belongs to has been extinct for 8 centuries. The trunk was wide enough that it shadowed a full residential block. The canopy, if that was the word for the mass spreading above it, had already cleared the district's tallest structure. The celestial radiance rank tree demon had awakened. Everything that had come before it, the frost cicada, the wildlife disruption, the masked man's coordination work, had been preparation. The park district's infrastructure had been quietly compromised for months, possibly longer. The root system below it tunneled and seeded with something that required a specific threshold of disruption and fear before it activated. The ancient beast society had been maintaining this process from inside the city, invisible to any of the standard monitoring systems, and it was now finished with the maintenance phase. The masked man looked up through the collapsed atrium roof at the spreading canopy. Then he said, loud enough for the atrium, that Lin Chongfang had served his purpose for the organization once. Doing so again wasn't something they would tolerate. Long Tian was still working through what that sentence contained when Lin Chongfang appeared in the street. He had come through the building's side exit, which meant he had heard the masked man from the corridor, which meant the decision had been made before Long Tian understood what decision there was to make. Lin Chongfang stood in the street below the tree demon's canopy and looked up at it with no particular expression on his face. Not awe, not fear, the expression of someone who has already done the math on a situation and arrived at a conclusion they're prepared to act on. The Flame Dragon Task Force's Partial Response Unit had reached the district by this point, working through the calculation of what to engage and what to hold against a beast, at a rank most of them had studied in theory and never expected to encounter in a provincial border city. Their unit leader was maintaining the perimeter. Lin Chongfang walked to the center of the street and raised one hand. The sword energy came from the technique itself, not a weapon, not anything external, something that had been sitting behind 20 years of a quiet border city life and had simply never been given a reason to come out. It rose over the roofline like a second sun going up, and everything in the district that could see the street went still. The task force unit stopped. People and buildings stopped. The tree demon's canopy registered the rising energy and directed its entire output downward in a single focused response. The two things met. When the light resolved, the tree demon was in two pieces. The cut was exact, so exact that both sections held their positions in the air for a full second before gravity remembered its jurisdiction and brought them down into the park district with a sound like a building choosing to become rubble. The street went silent. Long Tian stood in the atrium entrance with his hand against the doorframe and something happening in his chest that he wasn't going to examine right now. He had watched this man for years. Watched him at the kitchen table with the wrong arm reading glasses, tearing bread in half before eating it, setting the tea beside the book and letting the tea go cold. He had watched this man at every stage 3 medical appointment, at every prescription pickup, at every morning where the white cloth came out. That man had just cleaved a celestial radiance rank beast down the center from ground level, with nothing but his own technique, and made it look like something he had simply been conserving energy to do. The Ancient Beast Society member on the ground, one of the masked man's companions, survived the talisman detonation in the building's shadow, spoke from the rubble. He said Lin Chongfang had been one of theirs once. He said it loudly, directed at the task force officers, because the task force was the audience that mattered for what he was trying to accomplish. He said more after that, the organization's history with Lin Chongfang, what his defection had cost them, what the word traitor meant in their accounting. He said enough that the task force officers who had been looking at Lin Chongfang with awe began to look at him with a different kind of attention. Lin Chongfang stood below the aftermath of what he'd done and said nothing to any of it. Long Tian watched from the atrium entrance. He watched his father's posture, the specific quality of stillness that comes after a large expenditure, not the stillness of rest, but of something that has used a reserve it wasn't meant to use, and is now doing the accounting of what that cost. Lin Chongfang's hand came up slowly and pressed flat against his chest. He coughed, not loudly. He didn't need to. Long Tian had been hearing that cough for over a year, and he knew every register it could reach. Lin Chongfang walked to the far end of the street at his own pace and turned the corner. Long Tian ran after him. The corner was empty. He went to the next corner. Empty. He checked both sides of the block, the building entrances, the service alley between two structures that his father had always known existed because his father knew every shortcut in this city. No trail in the street surface. No open doors. No sign that a man had turned this corner 30 seconds ago. He stood in the empty street with both carrier cases still across his back and held himself inside the part of his mind that ran on practical function, because the other part was attempting something he could not afford to let it do in the middle of a city that was not finished yet. The savage turtle pressed against his leg from below. He put his hand on its shell and held it there without moving, while the city made its noise around them and the smoke from the park district drifted overhead. Then he went back to the hospital. His mother was waiting in the ward doorway. Not anxiously, waiting with the quality of someone who had already arrived at a decision and was simply holding the space for the conversation that followed it. She had been watching the window. When Long Tian came through the ward door, she turned and looked at him for a long moment, and then told him to come with her. They went to the small consultation room at the end of the corridor. One window, 2 chairs, antiseptic and old paper, the kind of room where serious, quiet conversations happened all day long, and the walls had absorbed every one of them. She closed the door. She said, "His biological father was Grand General Long Jianbang." Long Tian sat with that for a moment. Everyone in Linjiang province knew the name. A figure who existed at the scale of public portraits and official commemoration rather than anything that had ever touched his actual life. She said, "His biological mother was a woman named Ji Yan." She said it the way someone says a name they have been holding very carefully for a long time. Long Tian looked at her. She said Ji Yan had not abandoned him willingly. She said Ji Yan had made every decision available to her to keep him safe, including the hardest ones, including the ones that required her to be present as someone else entirely, for as long as it took for him to be able to survive on his own. She said all of this in the third person, past tense, careful syntax. Then she stopped. The consultation room was quiet. The city made its sounds outside. In here, there were only 2 chairs, and a sentence she had just finished about Ji Yan's decisions, and the specific fact that she had not, at any point in the telling, referred to Ji Yan as anyone separate from herself. Long Tian said the name he had used for her his whole life. She didn't correct it. She looked at him with the expression of someone who has stopped maintaining a particular fiction and hasn't yet found the expression that goes in the space where the fiction was. He asked how much of it had been real. She said Lin Chongfeng was real. She said what he felt about Long Tian was real, and what it cost him was real. She said the ancient beast society had been searching for Ji Yan's son for years, and ordinary was the best armor available to a child who couldn't yet protect himself. Then she stood, raised one hand, and drew her index finger across the consultation room wall. The wall separated, not cracked, cut, through concrete and plaster and the steel rebar embedded in both, as cleanly as a line ruled on paper. The cut was 1/2 meter long and left both edges smooth. She had been carrying this through every year Long Tian could remember, every kitchen table morning, every pharmaceutical run, every evening with bread torn in half out of habit and tea cooling beside an open book. She told him he had to leave Zhongchang. She said the academy was the right direction, and said practical things about timing and what to carry, and Long Tian listened to all of it and stored it without saying the thing sitting at the center of his chest, which was that he had come here for Lin Chongfeng, and Lin Chongfeng had turned a corner in an empty street and was gone, and he didn't know what was left after that particular fact. She put her hand on his face the way she had when he was young enough that the gesture required no analysis. Then she opened the door and walked back to the ward. The city's emergency shelter had commandeered the community gymnasium 2 blocks from the hospital. Long Tian found it by following the movement of people, families carrying what they could, medical staff moving patients on portable equipment, the foot traffic of a large space receiving more than it was designed for. He had come to move his parents. Liu Ruyan was at the supply station near the entrance. She hadn't registered him yet. She was talking to the woman at the distribution table, loudly enough to carry over the gymnasium's ambient noise, explaining that certain families who had ignored evacuation guidance had no real standing to make supply requests ahead of residents who had been at the shelter since the emergency began. Long Tian's mother stood quietly to one side, holding a supply request form. Liu Ruyan was enjoying herself. It was visible. She had found a position within the emergency structure that gave her small authority and was spending it with the specific pleasure of someone who had accumulated a grievance and located a legitimate channel for it. She said Long Tian was probably dead anyway. She said it with a smile. That was the moment he reached her. She turned at his mother's expression change, registered what she was seeing, and opened her mouth. Long Tian slapped her once, flat, without anger or ceremony, the way you close a door that has been left open long enough. He walked past her toward his mother without looking back. The gymnasium had heard it. Residents throughout the immediate area had heard it. Liu Ruyan stood at the supply station with one hand at her face, saying nothing, her expression cycling through stages that hadn't caught up to the moment yet. Xiao Shanjiang came from the secondary entrance before the moment could settle. A Tier 3 warrior who had been leveraging his combat ranking through the shelter's informal structure since the emergency began. He crossed the gymnasium floor with the body language of someone who had been waiting for a reason. He said a student who bought trash beasts had no standing in this shelter to put hands on anyone, and he was prepared to make that point in physical terms. Long Tian released the savage turtle. The scorpion tail came over the shell. A secondary appendage the modern jade pattern spirit turtle's lineage had lost entirely, retained in full by the blood pattern savage turtle's ancestral form. The tail struck once across Xiao Shanjiang's left side with the controlled precision of something capable of doing significantly more and choosing not to, yet. He sat down on the gymnasium floor without deciding to. The tail stayed visible. Long Tian asked Xiao Shanjiang to describe, loudly and in full, every decision he had made in this shelter, using his ranked position as the mechanism. Every supply allocation, every interaction where a Tier 3 warrior's presence had been the argument, rather than any actual authority he held. Xiao Shanjiang described all of it, at volume, to a gymnasium full of residents who had been on the receiving end of most of those decisions. When he finished, Long Tian recalled the turtle, walked to the distribution table, and collected his mother's supply request. The woman at the table filled it without comment. Her hands were very steady. Wang Kaiwan found him near the gymnasium's east wall that evening and sat down with the posture of someone who had spent the day verifying something before delivering it. The exams traitor wasn't the Yangqing team. The compromise had come through a bribed patrol examiner, a zone monitor who had been on society payroll through 2 examination cycles, feeding position data on strong candidate teams and suppressing intervention calls in designated sectors. The Yangqing team had operated under his protection, which was why their illegal beast sourcing had survived every standard review. The review's eyes had been purchased. Long Tian asked who confirmed it. Wang Kaiwan said he had paid for the confirmation himself. Long Tian said nothing for a moment. He watched Yu Chu Yao across the gymnasium, small, calm, helping a young family organize their shelter space, her verdant Triant in its carrier at her side. Wang Kaiwan had been within 10 meters of her for most of the day, in the layered way of someone both watching over and watching. Long Tian thought about the tree demon's root architecture and a specific origin signature he had catalogued against plant-type beasts in the ancient realm. He thought about a transfer to Zhongchang from outside the region, timed to the examination cycle. He didn't say any of it. Wang Kaiwan's ears had gone slightly red in a way that had nothing to do with the gymnasium temperature. Long Tian looked back at the wall and let it sit. He entered the legendary ancient realm at midnight when the shelter had gone still. The legendary tier door was different from the standard access points, heavier in the way things are heavy when the weight is informational rather than physical. He passed through it into a space that felt older than the other tiers, the specific age that silence carries at the base of something very large. The beast inside was chained, not by the environment or any staging system, physically chained, with links that had been resting against the stone floor long enough to leave their impression in the surface below each one. The Battle Saint Ape stood upright at the chain's full extension, a staff laid across its shoulders at rest, its face carrying the composure of something that had spent a very long time in this space, and had done so without breaking. It looked at Long Tian from across the dungeon. Something in the face produced a recognition Long Tian couldn't fully source. A shape that corresponded to something in a life he hadn't explained to himself yet. A figure from somewhere behind the part of his memory that arrived with clean edges. The ape held its ground and watched him with an intelligence none of the lower-tier opponents had carried. 4 days inside the dungeon. Not fighting, the legendary tier's structure was different. Demonstration, endurance, the sustained proof of something the ape was trying to determine. Long Tian failed the first day entirely, and most of the second. By the fourth, something had shifted in how the ape positioned itself relative to him. Not acceptance, but recognition. Something found sufficient. The contract formed at the ape's own pace. Third slot, bypassed. The legendary completion override applied the contract without the spirit requirement. The Battle Saint Ape arrived in his contract tether with the chain gone and the staff in its hand, and looked at Long Tian with the specific attention of something that had just made a decision it intended to honor. He applied the ancestral reversion serum. Heaven and Earth manifestation activated mid-reversion. The attributes multiplied by 5 across every stat line, and the body scaled to match. 10 meters. The shelter ceiling would have been the first problem if the shelter ceiling had been present. Long Tien observed the result from approximately the level of the ape's knee and revised his operational planning with the calm of someone who had learned not to be surprised by what his beasts became. He sent it back into the carrier and returned to the gymnasium floor. The Society's remaining squads moved at dawn, 3 teams, using the crisis as coverage, operating through the city while emergency response concentrated on the wildlife disruption's aftermath. Wang Kaiwan produced intercepted radio traffic before sunrise that contained the number 300,000, the sacrifice threshold required for the Society's secondary awakening protocol. What had happened to Zhang Chong so far was preparation. The actual event was still scheduled. Brother Wang came through the gymnasium's east service entrance with 2 beasts deployed and the fluid, economical movement of a Tier 4 pugilist, the combat class that required crossing the human warrior tier in addition to beast taming, operating his animals as extensions of his own rhythm rather than separate instruments. His strike sequencing was genuinely excellent. His beasts found joint pressure angles with the practiced precision of someone who had trained this specific approach for years. The Battle Saint ape filled the service entrance and received 3 exchanges. On the 4th, it stopped receiving and replied. 1 staff strike at 10 meters and 5 times base attributes. The question of Brother Wang's remaining combat capacity after that strike became abstract rather than practical. Long Tian collected the 2 staging operatives from the entrance, seated them against the gymnasium wall with the savage turtle between them, and asked about the 300,000. They explained the awakening protocol. Sacrifice threshold, city population, timing, the other 3 districts with assets staged and waiting for the signal. They explained until they had nothing left to explain, and Long Tian listened to all of it without expression. Brother Wolf arrived at the western entrance while the explanation was still running. His elite Azure Shadow Battle Wolf moved like smoke and struck like structure failing, not hitting targets so much as removing the option of existing where it decided to occupy. Brother Wolf had worked with this beast long enough that their timing operated at the reflex level. It was the finest combat pairing Long Tian had faced that didn't involve something from the Celestial Radiance tier. The Battle Saint ape was still in the gymnasium, the wolf's mobility advantage compressed against something 10 meters tall in a way no training scenario had prepared it for. The flank sequence found the flank relocated. The center assault found the ape already set, staff planted, receiving the impact at the weapon. 1 return strike. The Azure Shadow Battle Wolf went down. Brother Wolf stood in the entrance with open hands and looked at what remained of his operational capacity. Long Tian left the ape where it was, took the district location data to the Flame Dragon Task Force Coordinator 2 blocks east, and gave her everything: names, positions, signal protocol timeline, the full shape of what the Society had been building toward. She looked at him for a moment. She said he was a student. He said the exam had concluded 4 days ago. The other 3 district assets were neutralized before noon. The sacrifice threshold was not reached. The city's death toll was already significant, and it was not going to become what it had been designed to become. The crisis, by early afternoon, was over. Graduation was held in the school courtyard. 30 chairs in a row. 30 names called from a list. The ceremony head said the expected things about perseverance, about excellence, about the quality of this incoming cohort. He said these 30 represented the finest among this year's candidates. He said it with apparent sincerity, which was either performance or a genuine failure to do the count that Long Tian and Wang Kaiwan had done on the staging ground 5 days ago. Long Tian sat in his chair and let the ceremony proceed. Wang Kaiwan sat 2 seats over, and at the moment the admission number was formally announced, he turned his head very slightly and looked at Long Tian with the expression of someone confirming shared knowledge with one other person and no one else in the courtyard. Long Tian looked back. They both looked forward again. 30 chairs. 30 names. The number of students who had walked into the restricted zone was not the number sitting in this courtyard, and the gap between those figures was the actual cost of what everyone here was celebrating, visible to anyone willing to hold both numbers at once, unspoken by everyone in the program. People wept with relief. People embraced. A student 2 rows forward laughed with the full-body release of someone who had been afraid for a long time and was briefly, completely, not afraid. Long Tian let all of it run without interruption. Every version of it. These 30 had earned this morning, and the weight of the other count was his to carry, not theirs. The principal's office afterward, a sealed cabinet, ceremonial, maintained across several decades. One item inside, a top Earth-grade staff, the kind of acquisition that would have exceeded Long Tian's entire exam income if sourced through any commercial channel. The tradition was that the exam's highest-performing graduate received first selection. Long Tian took the staff. The principal watched him carry it out wearing the expression of someone who had expected to make this offer for years without being able to predict which student would finally collect it. The bus departed at dawn, 7 days' travel east toward Lingjiang City. Su Qing was at the loading area before most of the cohort. Single bag, carrier case, the composed exterior she wore in public that differed from how she held herself during training by a degree only visible to someone who knew the difference. Lu Yanrui had already claimed the front rows of the bus, occupying the space the way he occupied most spaces, as though his prior arrival were a form of argument. Su Qing walked the aisle to its midpoint and sat down beside Long Tian. Not across from, not one seat forward, directly beside him, carrier case at her feet. No explanation offered. Half the bus processed the decision. A student 2 rows back said something quiet to his neighbor. Wang Kaiwan, seated across the aisle, studied the window with maintained neutrality and the body language of someone keeping precise internal records. The bus left Zhangchang as the city was still working out what it would look like after everything it had survived. Long Tian watched familiar streets run backward through the window until the city gave way to open highway and then to country. Su Qing said, after an hour, that his Turtles defense application had improved considerably since the first session at the estate. He said the training had been productive for both of them. She said it had been. She said this in a tone that contained several things she declined to elaborate on. The days that followed were not unpleasant. The rest stop on day 4 sat in a courier relay district halfway between the two cities. A Flame Dragon Task Force transport was already in the lot. Different unit from the district coordinator during the city crisis. Deployed on the transit corridor. Long Tian registered the insignia stepping off the bus and saw Lin Hua at the relay station's food service area at roughly the same moment she registered him. He went to her directly. He apologized for the evacuation line breach without preamble, acknowledged it plainly, said he'd had a situation he hadn't been in a position to explain at the time. Lin Hua held his gaze for a moment. She said her unit had reviewed the gymnasium incidents and the information handed to the district coordinator, and the coordinator's assessment was that the city's morning had gone differently because of it. She said this cost him nothing in her accounting. She said it did cost him something in her personal accounting, regarding a bet she had made with her unit colleagues. Lu Yanrui appeared from the bus's direction at this specific moment with his swallowtail demon fox carrier, having watched Long Tian speak with the task force member long enough to decide the interaction represented a status claim that required a response. He said several things in front of Lin Hua and her colleagues about exam performance and competitive lineage, and the general difficulty of understanding how certain students had arrived at this relay station. He released the swallowtail demon fox. 3-star, transcendent, visually striking, expensive, everything Lu Yanrui had built his examination identity around, offered once more as an argument made physical. Long Tian opened both carriers. The savage turtle settled on the left, blood-patterned shell darkening in the afternoon light. The iron-eating beast sat on the right with the mild focus of something that had eaten a warbear's full armor plating and found that subsequent events had required progressively less of it. He sent them both forward. The fox committed to its opening aerial compound sequence, 2-layer, designed to saturate and force a defensive commitment before the precision follow-through arrived. The savage turtle absorbed the first layer with blood ignition already live, shell flooded red before the fox completed its arc. The iron-eating beast moved under the fox's flight line without urgency. The fox came down for the follow-through. The iron-eating beast was there. It caught the fox on the descent and bit through the wing joint with the decisive efficiency of something that had solved this category of problem long before this specific fox existed. The swallowtail demon fox hit the relay station ground without access to the altitude that was its entire operating premise. The savage turtle arrived from the other side. 11 seconds. Then the iron-eating beast ate the fox. Not symbolically, practically, with the unhurried focus it had applied to the warbear's combat armor. The swallowtail demon fox, 3-star transcendent, Lu Yanrui's entire competitive argument made biological, disappeared in portions. Lu Yanrui stood at the relay station with his empty carrier case and an expression that hadn't found its category yet. Lin Hua said, behind Long Tian, that she had won her bet. She placed 2 spirit-nourishing pills in his hand and embraced him with the decisive enthusiasm of someone completing a transaction they had been waiting to close since the city crisis. Long Tian accepted both. Su Qing, watching from the bus doorway, returned to her seat. Lin Hua produced the task force selection exam invitation, the district coordinator's request, passed along now that the opportunity had materialized. Long Tian pocketed it, retrieved his beasts, and went back to the bus. Su Qing's attention was fixed entirely on the window when he sat down. The window had not done anything to deserve this level of scrutiny. After approximately 40 minutes of maintained focus on it, she said, without turning, that his combat instincts had developed quite well. He said the training had been useful for both of them. She made a sound that wasn't agreement and wasn't disagreement and contained, somehow, 4 months of early mornings at the estate and every session that had built the wordless coordination they'd carried through the restricted zone, and everything sitting behind the fact that she had walked to this specific seat on both journeys without ever explaining why. Wang Kaiwan, across the aisle, appeared to be reading the back of the seat in front of him with an intensity it had done absolutely nothing to earn. Long Yuan Advanced Beast Taming Academy appeared on the 7th morning. Not gradually, all at once, clearing a final ridge, the way large structures announce themselves when they're built to be seen. The compound ran up into the Lingjiang mountain range's lower elevation. The main building stepped into the slope so that altitude was architecture, the highest sections visible well before the bus reached the gates. It was larger than Long Tian had carried in his mental image. The number of people inside it operating above anything Zhongchang could offer was proportionally larger. The bus pulled through the gate and stopped at the receiving plaza. A second-year student was waiting. Tu Yaki, wind element specialist, who introduced himself with the easy confidence of someone who had already been through what this cohort was about to begin, and found the outcome worth the process. He told them the academy would make their previous schooling feel approximate. He said this with the cheerful certainty of someone issuing a promise rather than a warning. Long Tian stepped off the bus into mountain air and looked at the main structure. Lin Chongfang was somewhere in this province. His biological father was a grand general who had sent people to kill him before the entrance examination. The Ancient Beast Society had his name and knew he was exceptional, even without knowing the full reason. His legendary dungeon counter sat at one of 10,000. A figure that described a very specific kind of long work ahead. 3 beasts, a top Earth-grade staff, 2 spirit-nourishing pills, a task force invitation, and the one thing he had actually come here for, a path to a healing beast capable of reversing what the blood poison had done to a man who tore his bread in half out of old habit and had never once told Long Tian what it cost him to do it. Su Qing stepped off the bus behind him and stood briefly at his shoulder, looking at the same gate. Then they both walked through it.